The last 10 days in the month of Ramadan are supposed to be the holiest of the year for Muslims around the world. Sadly, however, that is not the case in Gaza. Instead of family gatherings and communal prayers, Palestinians are searching for family members under the rubble again and praying at funerals. Since breaking the ceasefire, Israel has killed more than 750 Palestinians. And for those that survived the bombing, the shelling and the shootings, Israel is making sure they have nowhere to go by bombing the one place they could think to go, the hospitals. This has been a pattern for Israel, and that's not me saying it, that's the UN. Yes, the United Nations last year accused Israel of displaying a pattern of attacks on Gaza hospitals after carrying out 136 strikes on at least 27 hospitals and 12 other medical facilities. And that's just between October of 2023 and June of 2024. Plenty more hospitals have been bombed since then, the latest of which not only housed wounded Palestinians, but also American doctors treating them. On Sunday, Israel bombed Gaza's Nasser Hospital, the largest medical facility in South Gaza, killing at least 2 people and setting the second floor of the hospital's surgical wing on fire. Israel says the strike targeted a Hamas leader getting treatment at the hospital, which is such a brazen admission of guilt and a complete disregard for international law that, need I remind you, international law explicitly states civilian hospitals organized to give care to the wounded and sick, the infirm and maternity cases may in no circumstances be the object of attack, but shall at all times be respected and protected by the parties to the conflict. The other victim of the strike, by the way, was a patient of one of the 2 American doctors currently at Nasser Hospital, California's Dr. Feroze Sidhwa, a trauma surgeon, and North Carolina's Dr. Perlmutter, an orthopedic surgeon. Dr. Sidhwa tweeted on the day of the attack, saying, "I was at Nasser Hospital in Gaza when it was bombed today. One of my patients, a 17-year-old boy, was killed. He could have gone home tomorrow. If I had been changing his dressings as I planned to this evening, I probably would have been killed too. Attacking hospitals is a war crime and it needs to stop." Dr. Sidhwa and Dr. Perlmutter join me now from Gaza. My opening question is, guys, are you safe? And I know that's a very relative term in Gaza right now.
As much as anybody else, I think. We're not, I don't think we are. I think and I hope that our presence here actually protects the Palestinians a little bit from attacks. You know, you're asking because on March 23rd, the Israelis bombed the hospital that we're working at, and you know, I can't prove it, but I hope that they used a smaller munition because we're here instead of a larger one. If they wanted to destroy the whole hospital, since it doesn't seem anybody cares that they bombed a hospital. Maybe they would have used a larger one, killed a bunch of internationals. Just looks bad for them. So maybe we're keeping other people safe by being here.
Right, and certainly their ability to target cell phones even when they're off and send a present your way whenever they wish to is real. So I don't feel threatened while I'm here, really at all. But having said that, Israel certainly declared its ability to attempt to assassinate innocent healthcare and other peacekeeping forces like the UN last week in a safe house.
And as you mentioned the strike on the hospital on the 23rd, you have tweeted about how you were dealing with a patient there who was killed. Walk us through, if it's not too painful for you, walk us through what happened that day and what your experience was.
Yeah, no, so it was I don't know, probably 8 o'clock, 8:30 at night. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, no, I had the 16-year-old boy who was killed, Ibrahim Barhoum. He was my patient. I took care of him on March 18th when he was wounded in his tent in the Mawasi, and I repaired his colon, gave him a colostomy, and he would have gone home yesterday, the day after the bombing. But yeah, so I was on my way down to the men's surgical ward, which is on the 2nd floor, to change his dressings and just talk to his family and tell him he's okay to go home tomorrow. Don't worry, everything will be fine. But there's a doctor here, I think her name is Dr. Heeb. She just pulled me into the ICU and said, "Hey, there's a guy who's bleeding over here. Can you just take a look at him?" So we looked at him. We decided we were going to take him to the operating room, and that took like 10 or 15 minutes, and then that's when the bomb hit. So I was like walking out of the ICU when the bomb exploded, but I would have been in the surgical ward standing right next to Ibrahim, changing his bandages and talking to him and his family when the bomb hit. So, you know, it's a little weird, for sure. It's disconcerting.
And Mark, if Feroze had been killed, God forbid, do you think that would have made any difference? Do you think the US government would have cared that a US doctor just got blown up by an Israeli strike? Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
No, as a matter of fact, I had text messaged Congressman Darrell Issa, who provided me his cell phone number several months ago to gain advice on a potential solution. He's been blowing me off ever since. But I texted him and said Americans could be dying. Certainly, there's foreign nationals from probably 15 countries within 20 yards of us right now. And they're at risk. Could you please do something to stop it? And he hasn't responded at all. He has responded earlier this week, so he's getting my messages, and he gave me a read receipt. Just doesn't give a shit. The bottom line is our Congress doesn't care. I would have lost one of my best friends, and we would have kept on working because that's what Feroze would have wanted us to do. But and that's what we're here for. But we're losing friends all the time. We all have medical student friends that we befriended last year that are now dead. The targeting of healthcare workers is nothing that's new, but it's not our problem. The real issue is what's happening to healthcare workers within Gaza.
Yes.
There's still 350 healthcare workers imprisoned in Israel. Israel bemoans their own hostages, but they don't give a hoot about the 10,000 prisoners that they took. We call them prisoners on this side of the border. They're hostages on the other side, but they're the same. They're all absconded without committing any crimes. I have an orthopedic surgeon colleague here who was taken out of the operating room. His fingers were crushed. They showed him a picture of his wife from a spy, not from a magazine or an old photo, and it had a metadata said it was taken the day before, up close, and said, we're going to bring her here in front of you, and we're going to gang rape her in front of you if you don't admit that you're Hamas, or we'll keep breaking your fingers. He still didn't admit he was Hamas, and they said, well, then we're going to send a drone through your bedroom window and incinerate your children, and he still wouldn't admit he was Hamas. They beat him every time he asked to speak to a lawyer, and beat him twice as hard after he spoke to his lawyer. And he spent 11 months in prison, having probes inserted up his rectum by female IDS members who said that the probe was soaked in pork blood. Any way that you can psychologically destroy a human being, they did in that prison. And that story was absolutely repeated by the chief of the nursing department here and by multiple healthcare workers. It's not an isolated event. And that story was repeated in Al-Aqsa Hospital, where I spent 5 days north of here. And just yesterday, the chief of the surgery department, orthopedic surgery department, received a telephone call from the IDF saying that your wife works for the UN as a dentist. And because she works for the UN, you must evacuate. So they're over at the Mawasi now, living in a tent with 50 other people, a tent built for 20 with one toilet. And they had 5 minutes to get out of their house. They were given 5 minutes.
Wow.
I got a call from the U.S. Embassy after I sent out that tweet because I think people saw it, and the lady said, "Hi, this is the embassy. We just want to make sure you're okay." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. If you want to make sure I stay okay, maybe you could ask the Israelis not to bomb Nasser Hospital again." And I swear to God, I'm making this up. She goes, "Actually, that's not our role. Sorry."
Wow.
It's like, well, calling me to ask if I'm alive, if I'm dead, doesn't. You'll only find out I didn't pick up the phone.
This is the U.S. Embassy in Israel?
Well, this is, it was a 972 number, so that's what I'm assuming. And she said I'm from the embassy. I don't see why somebody would make that up. But that was wild.
And it parallels their behavior last year when we were here and the World Central Kitchen vans were bombed.
Yes.
And those volunteers were killed. I emailed the embassy 4 times, got read receipts. Thank you for emailing us. We'll get back to you right away. Never heard back. I called them. Called Chuck Schumer's office, spoke to his secretary 4 times, being the ranking Jew amongst us, and his office never responded back. So the amount of feedback. Go ahead. So,
No, I was gonna ask. You mentioned earlier the H word, and Feroze, I thought I'd ask you this. Mark mentioned Hamas, right? That is the be-all, end-all for the Israelis, apparently, so they claim. If you say to someone here in the West, in America, if I say the Israelis bombed a hospital in which 2 American doctors were at, the response will come back, well, Hamas were using the hospital to hide in. Hamas have turned the hospital into a military base. You are in the hospital. What is the role of Hamas in the Nasser Hospital, Feroze?
Yeah, so there's two things. One is, or actually, I guess it's the same thing. Number one, I would not to contradict you, but I would say it's not just Israel, but it's the U.S. and Israel that this excuse is used for constantly, and Britain too. Sure, it's just absurd. But number two, wounded combatants are actually protected people under international law. There's no debate about this. Nobody claims otherwise. Now, so that's off the table. You don't get to just kill people because they went to seek medical care, and you certainly don't disrupt a hospital for that. The original Geneva Convention in 1864 is about actually the protection of wounded combatants, not civilians. Just saying that people who are wounded and are no longer participating in combat have the right to receive health care and not to be mistreated, and certainly not to be murdered. So that's number one. Number two, every hospital or every room in this hospital is unlocked. Everybody can walk in anywhere, and there are no fighters or any such things going on here. It's ridiculous. But just to illustrate how crazy this killing is, Benjamin Netanyahu had his prostate removed on I think it was December 27th or 26th, late December last year, and he was in the hospital for a few days. Now, I have absolutely no doubt that from his hospital room, he was coordinating the war effort once he woke up from anesthesia. I'm sure he was. Well, he stands very credibly accused of genocide and extermination and starvation and all sorts of other heinous crimes. Does anyone think Hamas could just bomb the hospital that he's in? Or forget that. Suppose they didn't kill anyone else. Suppose Hamas just sent one guy to fire one bullet at Benjamin Netanyahu. It would have been a nuclear war after that. Everybody would have said it, because that is criminal. You don't kill people in hospitals. That's just the be-all and end-all of it. You don't do that. Even though, like I said, I'm sure Netanyahu was participating in the Israeli war effort from his hospital room.
Mark,
that's not what's done.
Mark, what is the situation in Nasser Hospital right now? We're reading about the Israelis having blockaded aid going in, supplies going in. The ceasefire is obviously over, if it ever existed. What is the situation in terms of Nasser Hospital's ability to treat people right now?
Remarkably compromised. I just came from Al-Aqsa Hospital, where I had to wash my hands in tap water before surgery, and I would clean a patient's arm before I repaired a broken elbow on a baby with tap water. They received no antibiotics, and their supplies are as bad as they were a year ago when we were here. And when the border was opened, now there's a blockade, and the supplies are dwindling rapidly. That's the smallest hospital of the 30-some that were initially present here. That's the smallest of the 3 that are remaining. There's only 3. There's a tremendous decrease in the number of facilities that can provide care, and this is probably the largest remaining hospital.
This is the largest in terms of bed capacity that actually exists. This is the biggest hospital in Gaza right now.
And so this hospital probably has, my best guess would be a week. Would you agree?
It's hard to know. Is in terms of life-saving, like hemorrhage control operations that we can do. So if you're bleeding to death, how to stop the bleeding. We have what we need to do that at the moment. But like actually just over my right shoulder, I don't know if it's visible. It's that building right there with the burned 3rd floor. That's the hospital's old warehouse. It was a dialysis center on the bottom, and the warehouse was the 3rd floor. The Israelis came in there. They raided this hospital a year ago in February and March. They searched it. They found only equipment for building a new operative room, and then they torched the place. So I don't know if you can hear the warplane going overhead, but and then they torched the place. So so this hospital doesn't even have the capacity to keep a strategic reserve of surgical supplies, of antibiotics, things like that. So if we keep getting mass casualty events like we've been getting since the 18th, there's no way we have the capacity to keep dealing with it, even just to control hemorrhage, which means people will die needlessly.
And then to add to that, just a scooch, when an orthopod fixes a fracture, we drill a hole in a bone and then put a screw into that hole, whether it's through a plate or through the fracture line, or we use pins. We have no plates in Al-Aqsa Hospital. We had no screws. So I use drill bits. the device we use to make the hole to put the screw in.
My God.
I kept the drill bits in the patient because that's the only metallic device that would fit in a drill that I could hold an elbow fracture.
This was a child, Mark?
Well, 4 months old.
You put a drill
open
bit
fracture from
into a fracture of a 4-month-old Palestinian child in Gaza.
right. Well, normally I would put pins in. The drill bit was a little bit bigger than the pins.
Oh my.
But the point is, we have no pins. The standard basic element of orthopedic care is a metallic pin, a stainless steel pin. They don't exist.
And that's not a fancy thing. It's in any third world hospital.
You both in the past. Let me ask you this: you both, Feroze, you wrote a piece for the New York Times which caused uproar. The Times had to come out and defend your op-ed when you showed the images of children being shot. Mark, you did a now famous interview with 60 Minutes where you talked about snipers shooting at children. Right now, are you know, this is not your first time in Gaza. You're back in Gaza. Are you still seeing evidence of children being targeted by Israeli forces?
So I actually haven't seen any children come in with single gunshot wounds to the head at Nasser since the 18th, or actually since I've been here. Thank God. But despite that, we focused on the shooting of children with single gunshot wounds to the head and chest or I focused on that on the New York Times article, precisely because it shows what the Israeli attack is. It's not possible to explain that away by saying they're collateral damage. Like one kid, maybe 2 kids, maybe, but in the catchment area of every hospital in Gaza for a year, no, that doesn't make any sense, obviously. But that wasn't to. I think sometimes people get distracted and think that's how children are being killed in Gaza. No, kids are being killed in Gaza the same way everyone else is, by getting blown up. That's the vast majority of injuries. And right now, when we were here last year, 40 to 50% of the casualties we're seeing, and most of the severely injured casualties are kids. It's mostly with shrapnel injuries and explosions. Like just last night. Maybe starting at it was about midnight, actually, when I went down to the ER. There was an Apache helicopter gunship attack on apparently just a few blocks that way. And I don't know if it was on a car or a building or what, but the one man and 4 children came in from that incident. A 10-year-old girl who probably is going to lose at least 2 of her limbs, if not 3, in the end. And then 2 4 or 5-year-old boys. I'm not sure exactly how old they were. The first came in with a devastating brain injury. He was still breathing, actually, but we don't have a neurosurgeon here, and we don't have the capacity to take care of a child that sick. So we just had he had agonal breathing, which means he was just a few moments away from dying. We told his dad to pick him up and take him over to the area where dead kids are allowed to die with their families. That's a real thing in the emergency room here. And then the next kid that came in, also 4 or 5 years old, also had a devastating brain injury. He was eviscerated, meaning his intestines were on his outside because his abdomen had been torn open. And we had to tell his family the exact same thing. A man came in with these huge wounds on his legs and his buttocks. Whether he was the target of the attack, I have no idea, but I know he was the father of the little girl that I just talked about, who's probably going to lose, who could conceivably lose 3 out of her 4 limbs. And he died this morning from blood loss and maybe from what's called a fat embolism, but it doesn't really matter. So we're still seeing, honestly, half, if not more, children who are injured, and whether the Israelis are targeting them on purpose or just killing them as carelessly as when I step on ants, I don't know, but it doesn't really make a difference.
Well, the night before I came back to this hospital, there was a 15-year-old girl riding his bicycle, and an Apache gunship shot at him, and we amputated one leg, the foot off the other leg. And the next morning, we spent probably 6 hours trying to repair nerves in the brachial artery in his upper arm. And the next morning, his hand was black. It wasn't successful. And so he literally lost 3 extremities. And this is a 15-year-old just riding his bike.
Horrific. Mark, I want to ask one last question to you before I let you both go, which is right now in the US, as I'm sure you're following, the Trump administration is cracking down on protesters, on students, on pro-Palestinian organizers. And they're doing it in the name of fighting anti-Semitism, to the point where the White House detained Mahmoud Khalil of Columbia University and used the phrase Shalom Mahmoud. You are a Jewish doctor who has gone out to Gaza. What do you make of what the Trump administration is doing right now?
It's only about money. Trump can say to Columbia University, I'll withhold $400 million from you if you don't play my game. And Columbia only cares about money. It's the same institution that fired or expelled a graduate student in 1936 for anti-Nazi protests. So when the Nazi Party had the same exact presence and donation patterns as the AIPAC does now, it's only about money. Trump's not making a decision because he's pro-Israel. He's making a decision because Israel gives him money, vis-a-vis the AIPAC and perhaps Christian Zionists.
And Feroze, last question to you. Obviously, a lot of Muslims are being targeted here in the US now for quote-unquote pro-Palestinian activities. What do you think is going to happen to people like yourself when you head back to the US? This isn't your first trip to Gaza. What do you think the reaction will be when you head back home?
I don't know. Actually, I'm not Muslim. I don't know that the government will care about that. But
you're a brown guy with a foreign-sounding name. Let me rephrase it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I doubt they'll. When I say I'm Zoroastrian, they'll say gay. But but yeah, no, it's I do worry about that. But in the end, I don't want, the American Association of University Professors has put out a statement saying that universities shouldn't engage in what's called anticipatory obedience, like Mark, I think, implied, like Columbia is doing. And it's certainly not just Columbia. Plenty of universities are doing this, unfortunately. And I'm not going to do that. If I haven't done anything illegal, I've only fulfilled the professional mandate that my profession requires. I took an oath to help people. I didn't take an oath to say I'd help everybody unless they're a wounded Hamas combatant or some other nonsense. Anybody who comes into this hospital, they can be an Israeli soldier. I don't care. Yeah, I just don't care. I help people who need help. That's my job. I stop people from bleeding to death. I don't care what they look like or what they believe. Well, so I'll just keep doing that, and if I end up in Guantanamo Bay or something, that sucks. But I guess I'll help people down there too. Who knows?
Feroze, Mark, we appreciate you both. Please do stay safe, and we hope we can stay in touch. And I'm sure, on behalf of all our viewers, we thank you for all your work out there. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.